No, nobody can. Everybody knows that. Multitasking is a lie.
Multitasking is a lie.
Task switching.
Just getting this just in. Both my parents had a rough night last night, so they're not coming to the show. So glad they let me know, because then I would be sure that they had been house kidnapped or something like that. Welcome to the Backpack Show.
You can tell them when you have a rough night, you still host the show. So there.
Yeah, I can run a show with one eye. Who can't? Arr. Welcome to the Backpack Show, run by pirates and hooligans. We are here to talk a lot of business fun. We have some great guests today. We have so much going on. Kerry, what's happening today?
So today, Rob Hatch, your partner at Owner Media,
Rob,
recommended one of today's guests to me. Shay, Black girl on Maine, has been blogging about her experience moving from Chicago, or native Chicago, to Maine.
Slightly different Chicago.
Yeah, very different experience. She's also executive director of a nonprofit, so we're going to talk about that as well. She's done a TEDx talk, all sorts of fun things. So lots of important conversations to be had there. And then you booked our other guest, Julie Rodgers.
Julie Rodgers. Amanda Height. I've been friendly with Amanda Height for years and years and years. And every now and again, of course, I see Julie through that process. And I follow Amanda on Twitter, and she was sharing Julie's new book called Outlove. And I was like, oh, well, that's just right up the alley of this show. So we have to talk to Julie about the show. About the book. There's so much stuff to do. And I just feel like it's a beautiful day in this one-eyed neighborhood. That's all I can tell you about that.
Makes me sad.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show. Our man, Tim Kitzrow. Never gets old.
Yeah, his energy is contagious. Like I just play little clips of his, and I feel like I'm more peppy than I was before. So.
Take on the world, right?
No, I do, but
so good. It's very interesting. Our first guest, Shay, lives on an island where there's only about 800 or so people, just under 900 people, and I know one of the other people on the island, Amanda O'Brien.
So funny,
Amanda Pants. It's a small planet. I mean, ostensibly, I know her kid, although I don't really think I've ever met him.
So I'm not sure how to say Shay's last name. That's why I didn't.
I was going to go with Stewart-Bouley, but it could be
I usually ask.
Bouley. Well, let's try
to ask. Yes, I don't like to insult people by getting it wrong.
Shay, set us straight. How do we do it?
You are absolutely right. I'm actually impressed. It's Shay Stewart-Bouley.
It's because it sounds so much more classy, and you're a very classy person. That's kind of what I led with.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, because most people say Shay Stewart-Bouley, and I'm like, no.
That's not right.
It's weird, especially now in Maine where there's all those French Canadians. If you put a T instead of a Y, they'd all get it.
Well, a little tidbit. So I was married for 20 years to a guy who has French Canadian roots, but his folks were from Minnesota. So in Minnesota, they apparently used Y's instead of T's. So whenever I've had to tell Mainers that, because apparently you're right. Like if it had been a T, people would get it, but the Y throws them off.
You could turn it into an AY, and then everybody would get it.
Exactly.
All the names. Well, what's in the name? It is important. We like to make sure we get the names right and all that. But so beyond why did you move from Chicago to Maine? I guess start there, because that's shenanigans.
Well, actually, I did not willingly move here.
Okay, you're a prisoner. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I as I tell people, actually, it's a pretty boring and plain story. I've been married twice. And my first husband and I, when we split up, we had a really, I guess you'd say, pretty nasty custody battle over my son. And he moved back to Maine, and, and I was in Chicago, and we were fighting for about 3 years. Meanwhile, our kid was like 6 or 7 at the time. Long story short, I decided to move to Maine because at that point, it was before 9/11, and my son was flying back and forth every month. I mean, this kid literally, he's flown so many times. He's now almost 29. So I basically moved here to make joint custody work better. So
and he probably has so many frequent flyer miles now.
He did. Well, the interesting thing is that my son's a musician, and that's a whole other story, who's literally traveled the world. But by the time he was 10, yes, he had tons of frequent flyer miles. So basically I moved here because of joint custody. Gotcha. I wish I had a sexy story about why I moved to Maine, but no, I was just a parent who got tired of fighting my ex-husband.
Did you instantly love Maine, or were you ready to go home right away?
I actually did not like Maine. I moved here in 2002. So I moved here right after like 9/11. And if, you remember the energy in the country at that time, as a Black person, a woman of color moving to this really white state, people, they didn't know how to process it. I think one of the hijackers had flown through Maine. So there was like a lot of suspicion around people who were different. It basically, I always described my first couple of years here as feeling like I landed like on a different planet. Like I literally felt like a different world. I was just like, where the hell am I? When I moved here in 2002, people weren't like doing a lot of things electronically. So there were like tons of stores you'd go to where they'd only accept cash. The way that people spoke, it just was like, the accents here are really hard to get used to. I mean, especially according, for me as a Midwesterner. So no, I moved here and it was completely like, where am I? How long until I can leave?
On a timer. Well, so I was born and raised in Maine, and one of the jokes that I've said forever, to the point that it's almost true, was that growing up, I wasn't especially good at being racist or anything because there were only 3 Black people in the entire state. So like people would make racist jokes and I wouldn't get it. Like it wouldn't make any sense to me because I didn't have any point of reference. So that was true of Maine for quite a long time. It was French Canadians or it was Irish people, maybe some Italians. That was like the exotic person. But then in the last 10 years or so, a massive Somalian immigration population came to southern Maine, to around Portland. And all of a sudden, Maine had to deal with a lot of things, including being a whole different kind of bilingual. And there's a whole lot of new things I had to learn. So you got there before that, but you were there to kind of see that happen. How did that impact all of this stuff?
So I moved here, like I said, in 2002. So actually, I have been here as long as probably the first influx of groups that originally came through the Lewiston area.
Right.
Literally, when my first year here, both my parents were still alive. There was like a march, like a KKK style, like march up in the Lewiston area, because if the mayor at the time in Lewiston actually like wrote like, please stop coming here, because he felt that people were taking too many resources. But I do want to correct something, because there's a real myth about Maine not being diverse. This state has a very rich history in terms of people of color. That history's been hidden. There's some great work that's been done. A white woman by the name of Kate, I can't think of her name, but she's with the Smithsonian, originally a Mainer, in terms of Maine's relationship to the slave trade and maritime, that whole industry. There's so much of the history of people of color in Maine that's actually just been completely, people just don't talk about it. So what you said, while accurate for you, is actually inaccurate, because people really think, well, there are no people of color here, so there can't be racism. And the fact is, you actually don't need any people of color to be racist. That's the whole sort of point. Like, racism doesn't require me to be present in the room. It's, it's embedded in terms of how you think, how everything is done, the systems themselves. But I've heard so many versions of what you said in terms of people like, I grew up in Maine, and I only knew, I have my own podcast, and I did an interview a while back with one of the state lawmakers who's from Fort Kent. And he talked about there was one Black guy who came to play at the whatever. And it was like, huh? Like, that's such a weird reality. And yet it's like, yeah, everybody in your town could be racist. Didn't matter that there was only one Black guy there.
Well, you'll be really happy to know that as soon as Chris met a Black person, he went up and asked them about all the racist things he'd ever heard that he didn't understand. Like, hey.
No, you didn't.
I did every single one. I was like, Lee, what's this mean? He'd be like, well, and it was like everything you're not supposed to do, right? Because how do you know?
No, Chris, you should have known me. No.
We were in Chicago, and I didn't have a really good bus pass. So, but you do similar work. I don't know if you know Genevieve Bien-Ami down here in Boston. She does The Other Boston. Same sort of thing. Same sort of thing. So she comes to Boston. Everyone says there's not a half a Black person in all of Boston. And she says, oh, there is. 1 in 4 people in Boston are people of color. And she started a whole thing called The Other Boston. So when
you can have events in person and stuff. So she made an events calendar up. She created pride shirts for neighborhoods that used to be left off the maps entirely on purpose by the people who are making the maps. So like Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Dorchester, other Black areas in Boston. So you can get T-shirts now that have those neighborhoods on them. She's doing really good
JP
work.
is actually no longer a Black area thanks to gentrification.
Right. No
Yeah.
question there. So here you are doing that work in Maine was my point. Like here you are, helping with things, through the Phoenix and through other places and through a lot of talks. Very interested to hear like how that went for you. How did, like you said, there was like a practically a Klan kind of rally thing going on. What has changed for you, and what do you see the fruits of your efforts over all these years?
So I think I should probably tell you a little bit of the backstory, because there's a lot of the story that unless you really like dig deep about me, you don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
So up until 2014, my anti-racism work, so to speak, was sort of hidden, in part because my actual background is, I have a master's in nonprofit administration. I ran, nonprofits. My last position before this one was actually, I was the executive director of a Christian youth development organization with an all-white board. So, they thought themselves very large to have hired me in the first place, much less, you can't be making trouble, Black lady. We hired you. My God. So for years, I was like writing with the Phoenix and doing all like my blog, but people in my day-to-day life had no idea, because the greatest thing about being a writer is that nobody knows what the hell you look like. So it's like, if people weren't picking up the Phoenix or searching me out, they had no idea. I was just a lady who ran a small nonprofit in Biddeford, Maine. That started to change in 2012 when I appeared on a national talk show. There was a show back on MSNBC at the time called The Melissa Harris Perry Show. And it was around that election cycle that the then governor LePage, if you remember him, he was like this really bombastic, racist, not nice man. And he made a comment talking about like, there were busloads of Black people who got shipped here to vote. Like there was, shenanigans going on. So the Melissa Harris Perry Show was like, well, there's got to be a Black person in Maine. Let's check this out. So right. So literally her research team found me and was like, can you like be on the show via, Skype? It was like, okay.
Like, hey, we found the one.
Right. It was like, okay. So I show up on this Saturday morning talk show via Skype, and I'm like, nobody is going to see me here. Like, it's only people in real places that are going to see me.
Right.
So like Monday, I show up at like some social service provider meeting in Southern Maine, and like half the people had seen me on national TV. So suddenly, like my cover was blown. It was like, oh man, I was like the undercover Black lady getting to like be in the trenches, like writing what I was seeing, but they had no idea it was me. To answer your question, like I have seen a lot of change, and it's interesting because I'm in a place that, my day job, we're one of the oldest anti-racism organizations in the country. CCI was founded in 1968. So I have access to a wealth of people across this country who do work that I do. Thinking about it in the context of Maine, it's easy to feel like, I think for the younger folks coming up, the younger activists, that change isn't happening. And yet when I moved here, people didn't talk about race. In fact, when I pitched the idea of writing, I had this idea like, wouldn't it be great to have this Black lady from away to give you insights? Wasn't I very arrogant? Because I just assumed that my insights were needed. And so like most of the publications I approached didn't even respond to me. And at the time, what was the one paper, the Casco Bay Weekly? It was like the big alternative paper. And so it was only the Phoenix that was willing to take a chance on me. But it was crazy. Within 6 months of writing for the Phoenix, I got my first death threat. Like somebody sent it to,
gosh.
they
Just
sent
6
it.
months? I'm impressed.
It only took 6 months back in 2003.
That's slow.
Threat. And they wrote it on a piece of paper and mailed it to the editor. Like,
Wow.
now they just get on the internet and tell you to go do whatever.
Right.
So when
I had to pay for a stamp.
Exactly. So, it's been interesting. Like the conversations that sometimes would get poo-pooed by, my then editor are now mainstream conversations. I think that's the thing that I'm amazed by. My kiddo, my youngest kid's in the Portland, Maine school system here. And it's like, they are having conversations. She literally just finished before the holiday break. I was a speaker in one of her classes. Like they were talking about anti-racism work as it applies to teenagers. They just had finished reading Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped. I'm like, this is amazing. I have an undergraduate degree in African-American studies because we didn't used to talk about any of that. Like it was all like, it just didn't exist. Like I literally didn't know history in terms of Black folks in this country until I went to college and spent a lot of money to learn something that actually should have been integrated into our classroom work from the K through 12th grade.
Decolonizing the classroom is an important topic that's getting a lot more press these days, thank goodness, because it's amazing what people don't know. Using this last year's energy for some bit of good has been trying to help a lot of people who are willing to be allies and ready to be allies to catch up on some of this. So it must be an interesting experience doing that in Maine as well. But also, like you said, seeing your kids go through it and seeing your kids learn some stuff that, was not typically shared just in the vernacular. It must be an interesting time,
it's interesting, but it's also frustrating because I do feel, last year was a big, year in terms of this great awakening, or so we like to say it was. And yet to me, it really wasn't an awakening. I think that if people hadn't been in a pandemic trapped at home, they probably wouldn't have cared. And I most certainly, given what I do, my work is focused regionally and somewhat nationally, in terms of my day job. We've seen the drop off. Like in May and June, people were buying the books. They were excited. They wanted to book speakers. And now it's like, that's uncomfortable. So we have a long way to go in terms of where people are really going to go in terms of white people, because right now I would say white people are approaching this as sort of I want to help you people. And the reality is, and I'm trying to keep it lighthearted here, one, because I haven't had enough coffee, but the truth is that, anti-racism work is not about helping Black, Indigenous people of color. It's about the shared liberation of all of us, for white people to understand that what you received in terms of what feels like a gift was actually a curse because your own humanity was at stake. It was sort of like, in order for white people to get where white people have gotten, you sort of lost a piece of your soul. So it takes getting into anti-racism work to kind of reconnect all of those dots back to becoming a whole person. Granted, that's not as attractive for people at the 101 level. So we don't try to scare you right away to tell you that you need your soul back.
It's like Scientology. You got to wait till the end to drop the really crazy stuff on them.
Yeah, but you know what? The thing is, it's not crazy. It's like, it absolutely, folks who've been doing anti-racism work, while it may seem like something that just came out of the blue, it's not something out of the blue. It's something that has been around for a very long time. It's just that it only used to exist in academic and some activist headspaces. It wasn't a mainstream concept. The problem with bringing it mainstream is that it's been distilled down into these sound bites. So people really don't know, like, okay, I think I just want to be a good ally. You see a lot of
nobody wants to not be a good ally. Like not a lot of people are saying I'm racist and I'm fine with it. I mean, a few, right? They're probably protesting in DC right now.
Well,
but
at least
not
70 million people did say that when they effectively voted for Trump.
Well, that's true. But I think a lot of people, they're well-meaning enough, but they don't appreciate what's needed. Like I saw, like you did, that little blip around May and June where people were making an effort to be more inclusive, and then it just snapped right back. Like the rosters on a lot of panels, conferences that were happening online, and shows even like this one, not like ours because we've tried not to, but other people will snap right back, and you look at their rosters and they're all like that. So what can we do to help? Like, what should people be doing? I know that's one of those questions that everyone's like, don't you know you should be doing stuff? We're extending invitations anytime we can, and getting, which is like twice a week, twice a day, 5 days a week, and trying to have these conversations and offering opportunities to elevate voices that maybe are underrepresented, especially in the business space. We need more. So what more can people do?
So the other more piece that I would do, I think it's great to give visibility to BIPOC folks, especially in business spaces. But I think I would ask, as white people, why exactly do you feel, why are you doing this? And how do you start having this conversation amongst white people? Because one of the problems you have in the business sectors, especially, there's the issue of representation. But as I tell people, representation really doesn't mean anything to me. How many big companies have like a chief diversity officer, yet the chief diversity officer is not a major part of the leadership team? As I put it, oh, that's that job y'all created for whatever person of color you want to feel good. So they're over there, but they don't get to sit at the big boys and girls table making decisions. So unless the people, have access to power, like nothing really changes. So for me, the question is, if people in power want to make changes, you need to actually be able to answer the why. Like, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because it's a moment? Are you doing it because you feel guilty? Like the why. The why becomes important because the why is what will sustain you and keep you in the work. If you start to see it as, man, I want to build community, with these folks over here, like you're going to be in it when it's not comfortable, when those conversations do get tense. Chris, when we opened up, you made the joke about, meeting your first Black friend and asking all these questions. Well, I look at it this way. Once you get past that level of things, being able to maintain those friendships requires knowing the why. Why, especially I think because for people of color, there is such a heavy burden to teach white people what they don't know. So give me a reason why I need to teach you. Right.
No question about it. I mean, that's one of the first things that you read in White Fragility is you read that this is not the Black person's job. They're not, put on this earth to be your teacher for all the stuff you got to catch up on. So there's a lot to it. So I'm really glad you came. I'm glad you came to, bring the conversation, Shay. It means a lot. Stick around if you can. We have a little panel. If you got to run, I know you got to run, but we're going to do that.
I know it's early.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for bringing the conversation. It's ultra important. I was thinking about too our former guest Jessie Hooker-Bailey when she was saying about there's plenty of people of color in Broadway, but there's not plenty of people of color in Broadway in the main starring roles. Yeah, and that's what she started to put together is that same thing about the diversity.
Well, what was heartbreaking for me about that was that Jessie had graduated school with the same credentials as a lot of like white performers, and then kept seeing those other white performers get the lead roles, and she would get understudy or something. And she was thinking, I guess I need to work harder. So she'd go work harder and she'd do more and try to learn more. And it took a while.
They did.
For her to realize, but then, then it starts looking like, oh, well, we're casting them because they have more experience, but they had more experience because right out of the gate, they had advantages.
They did.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. She's doing amazing. Follow her on Instagram, Jessie Hooker-Bailey.
So if Jessie were to write a book, she could put it on PubSite. Yeah. We're sponsored by PubSite, a website for authors. Authors, if you make an incredible book of your own, you need a place to show it off. You can show it off on PubSite, pub-site.com. Kerry, talk about it.
It's super, super easy to use. I'm not a technical person like at all. I'm at best a half-ass web person. You can do this. You can make your own website on PubSite. It's totally customizable. It has all the pieces you need to promote yourself as an author, your appearances, when you can have them again, your book, your social feeds, all the things. So go to pub-site.com, try it out. There's 14-day free trial. After that, it's just $19.99 a month. And if you don't want to build it, even though you should, because it's really easy, they'll do it for you for $499, which is crazy inexpensive. In fact, if you need a website, you don't even have a book, just use PubSite and then write the book later.
Super affordable. All right. Make a show. See brogan.me/StreamYard. StreamYard is how we make this show, how we make it look so easy, and how we can bring so many great and interesting guests to you. Just make one. See brogan.me/StreamYard.
Bring your own activists.
Bring your own activist. So, let's do some comments. Nice
logo.
We're sponsored by Johnsonville. Yeah, by the way, you're saying nice logo for PubSite. That's the new PubSite logo.
Yes.
So that's a good one. We're sponsored by Johnsonville, all because I made a stupid joke and said, hey,
you made a stupid joke every day for months. Let's be honest.
Johnsonville should sponsor me, I said. And they were like, that's crazy. We'll send you some t-shirts. And I said, come on, cop up some money. And they did. And so we send sausages to strangers. And that's what we did.
They weren't total strangers. But yes, we sent sausages to members of the backpack community that we are lucky to serve. And we sent some to Sister Ann Flanagan at the Daughters of St. Paul. And she made pizzas with them. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, Jason Falls has a 8-minute epic video coming up, and I forget who else. Valerie sent us, 75 minutes.
We'll have to do another. Johnsonville Day.
Another Johnsonville Day, just for
Johnsonville Appreciation Day.
I am going to drag Julie Rodgers out here. We're going to talk about her new book, and Julie is also helping the world get better eyes on things. So, boy, I really need better eyes today. Really excited to drag her in. We're going to talk about Outlove and a bunch of stuff. Hey, Julie.
Good morning.
How the heck are you today?
Pretty fantastic, actually. I think looks like we got the Senate. So I'm very happy about that.
Just now, because it was still unsettled when I started.
It's looking that way. So that's pretty exciting. And we have 4 cats. One of them, our little adorable, curious guy named Kai, is up here bopping around with me. So he might show up, but yeah, it's great.
I have a graphic for it. I'm ready. The cat makes an appearance.
So you've done a bunch of things. You've spoken, you've gone around, you've talked, you've advocated, you have all kinds of group stuff going on, but you have a new book coming out this summer called Outlove, a queer Christian survival story. Talk a little bit about what that's about, because that's why I wanted to drag you on. I'm really just interested in that interplay of, I'm Christian, this isn't going so well for us, and how cool that this current sitting Pope is like, hey, let that all go. Like, be all cool with that. We have bigger fish to fry. Let's not worry about gay people.
I love that he came around to that finally.
This is not what the Pope had said, or any popes had said for hundreds of years. So it's the right time for the book. But talk a little bit about that in the movement and everything.
Yes. So I did not grow up Catholic. I grew up Southern Baptist in Texas, a little town called Tomball, Texas, and the evangelical church. So this book is about my experience sort of growing up at the center of the debate between evangelicals and the LGBTQ community.
Oh, wow.
My story is kind of like mirrored the evangelical religious rights response to queer people over the last couple decades. I was homeschooled all the way till high school because my mom wanted to keep me away from the gays and like science teachers. And I didn't really
go together.
I know, right?
Gays and science teachers.
But I was wild as I didn't actually do school. So I was just like watching like shows every day and out like splashing in creeks and playing basketball. But by the time I was in high school, I was like, oh man, like I am super gay. And I had grown up, sort of hearing the message from people on the religious right that, my mom often echoed, like gay people are an abomination. And, those dykes are so disgusting. And I had always wanted, from the time I was a little girl, just to be good. Like I really, really wanted to be good. I was so earnest. And I really loved Jesus. I was really moved by the way that Jesus loved kids and sick people and poor people. And so I had a sincere and genuine faith, and I wanted my parents to be proud of me. And I was just like, being gay was like the worst thing in the world. Like it would be better for me to it was the worst thing in the world because they would sort of see it as like, a sin that was ever present. It wasn't like, oh, you like robbed someone or murdered somebody and you can like ask forgiveness. It's like, you're always doing this thing. So it was a real big bummer to realize that I was gay. And I came out to my mom when I was 16 years old on Valentine's Day of my junior year in high school. And
Wow.
my parents loved me. They were like, wanted to be good parents, and they loved their daughter and realized pretty quickly that there were other people out there who, what they would say, struggled with same-sex attractions. And so she took me out of school early the following Wednesday and took me to go meet with a minister who was like a pastor at a First Baptist church in Texas, and essentially ran what was a Christian conversion therapy program. Like a lot of people think that conversion therapy is just happening among like licensed professional therapists, and that it is happening among them. But the primary place that it's happening is in like Christian ministries, nonprofit ministries, churches, where there's like a pastoral counselor that's essentially like teaching these reparative therapy techniques that are widely discredited by the APA, by all major medical associations in America. So anyway, I spent
Julie,
10 years in that program.
Is that Exodus? That's Exodus International's thing?
So that was a member ministry of Exodus International, which
Okay.
not many people know about. Yeah, Exodus International shut down in 2013 because the president was like, "Hey, this doesn't work. We are causing harm."
Right.
And so this was an organization that was like a sort of they had 150 member ministries. This was a member ministry, and we would go to the conference every summer, and it was all kind of the same atmosphere, stratosphere.
Can I tell your story out of order just a little bit, because you just sort of said like, oh yeah, Exodus shut down, as if like it just fell over one day. But Rodgers had something to do with that. Like that didn't just fall down on its own. So let's not be so humble here. Can we talk a little bit about what it took to help a whole lot of people learn that they didn't have to be ex-gay?
That was really kind of you. Thanks, Chris. This ministry that I was a part of had me start giving my ex-gay testimony when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And so they had me get for their donor banquet, and I guess it went well. And so they kind of like took me on the road with them. And eventually, despite the fact that I was like still developing, still had college ahead of me, still had a lot to learn. I was sort of like giving this testimony that they helped me craft that illustrated their theories. And eventually Exodus International heard me and was like, hey, will you come do that with like our conferences before we speak? And so during this time, I was starting to be like, I've been at this for like 6 years now. I graduated college and I'm still gay. And more than that, was starting to see friends of mine who had come through the ministry and left, who were really, really struggling. Several of them had gotten into severe drug addictions, meth, a lot of sexual addiction, and just, destructive behaviors that they didn't want to be wrapped up in, but the shame had driven them there. And so eventually I started kind of talking to all the leaders and saying, hey, this is really damaging. It doesn't work, and it's harmful. And so eventually I sort of went to pull out of the speaking circuit, and they asked me to stick around. And I said, I can't be a part of something that is harming the most vulnerable people. And Alan Chambers, the president of Exodus International at that time, was like, hey, Julie, I've been seeing the same thing, and I think this can't be reformed. I think it needs to end. Would you be a part of our organization for this next year, telling the truth, telling people what you just told me, and sort of help me end this? And
wow, to undo everything.
Yeah, it was a really big moment. It just sent a really loud message to people in more conservative Christian communities that this didn't work and this was harmful and we needed another way.
It must have been intense in so many different ways. And I'm thinking about the fact that, prior to that, when you were there doing that speaking, of course, your whole gay community is looking at you. You're the enemy. You're not on their side, and you're making it really bad for them. And so for you, it must have been hard. You must have had to go through like I was the bad guy, or whatever part of that you want to own, because you were pulled through it too. You don't have a choice. I mean, you were, victimized into being a bad guy, but I just wonder, like, do you cover that in your book? And also, what do you say to people if you were to speak now, because you give talks back when, the pandemic didn't exist? How do you talk about that? How do you talk about that going from that side to this side?
That's a great question. I think I definitely talk about that in my book and deal with that. And I think if we're honest, most of us, when we look at our lives and our impact in the world, we can say that we're not just victims. We're not just villains. We're not just champions. We're sort of, we've all played these different roles at different points. And ultimately, even though, I was young, I was in my teens and early 20s when I was involved in it. And I still take responsibility for the time when I knew, hey, I'm not changing, and I'm still a part of the system, and people are using my story to shame others into trying to change. And I think we want people who are leaders on the religious right, people who are causing harm, to change, and we have to create a place for them to go. We have to be able to celebrate that people do change, that people do repent and realize the harm they're doing and start living a different way. And if the only response is just to shame and vilify people who are currently in leadership positions of organizations that are harmful, then we're never really going to see the change we need to make. Especially if you look at conversion therapy right now, that's not going to change through any sort of legislation or through the courts. So we're going to have to change hearts and minds, because these organizations are protected by religious freedom laws. So I would say, yeah, I caused harm, and I was moved by the stories of the most vulnerable to change and to see a different way and to live a different way. And I hope that every single leader and every single pastor who's promoting those messages right now will do the same.
Julie, you are so brave. What a difference you're making in the world, says Carol. And Karen Putz, who's a deaf author, amazing barefoot water skier, says, wow, what a journey of becoming who you are.
Oh.
It's tricky stuff. The reason I wanted to ask you that wasn't like, hey, Julie, want to feel bad? But I definitely wanted to say that to be at the center of it like that, to be at the core. And also, I mean, it's hard enough just to deal with your queer journey, especially with a family that didn't really want that, in a set of religious systems that absolutely were, vehemently against it. It's hard enough, even if, just being out in the world or whatever. And I think it's trickier still that, when we have to kind of figure out our role. And it was what Shay said to me too. Shay says, I don't have to be here for you to be racist, and I think that's an important part of picking this whole thing up. And there's a lot to it. I want to, ask you some of the good side of things too, because I feel like that was a hefty question. It feels like I probably should take the wet sweater off for a second. Where does the world go now? Is it better? Is there so much more to do? Like how is that system right now? And what's your role in where you go next?
By and large, I think we can all feel that we are in an infinitely better place in this country and in many religious and especially conservative communities with sort of celebrating LGBTQ people and same-sex relationships. I have an amazing wife now. We got married a little over about 2.5 years ago at the Washington National Cathedral. So we got married in a church by a priest, this amazing, extraordinary, vibrant woman who just, is able to say God delights in your union and you're a gift to this world. And so I think we're definitely seeing big change. At the same time, my many family members are still not in touch with me and haven't been willing to meet Amanda. And it's we see, tremendous change. And yet they're still in these communities that maybe aren't, rainbow Coke cans aren't going to make it any easier for a kid whose parents tell them to pack their bags and go when they come out. And so I think we've got a long way to go in a lot of conservative religious communities. But there's hope because we've already seen so much change.
You are the first guest, I just want you to know this, of how many episodes have we done? 150 to promote your spouse.
Yeah.
A lot of people will be like, oh, I have an amazing wife. They don't say share their link.
Yeah, I sure hope that's not a theme, by the way. I'm not into it, but
You did.
I'm into Amanda. I'm into Amanda, so that's why.
I recently started a Substack, so I've got a newsletter, and people that were getting on and commenting were like, "I'm just so excited to get to interact with Amanda here." And I was like, maybe Amanda should just be doing.
Hey, welcome to my life. Welcome to my life. People are like, "Oh yay, I love Chris." I'm like, yeah.
So I'm going to grab Shay back, and I want to talk about, there was something you mentioned about the rainbow Coke cans that sent me off, which is some of the comedians that I like a lot, like Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle had made, a comment. A few other people have made a sort of similar joke, so I don't know who said it first, but it was basically, Black Lives Matter was such an important part of this year, and then, one of the biggest heat waves of it this year was in June, which is typically Pride Month. And so one joke that was said was, what are the corporations going to do? Are they going to be able to put their black and white graphics up, or are they going to have to put their rainbow graphics up, or are they going to have to share every other day? The joke being that, corporate activism is sometimes nothing more than just a logo swap. So I was thinking about you, Shay, and I'm sure you have a thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that sometimes corporate activism, especially when it comes to anti-racism work, is pretty empty. I think, again, we saw, this past spring and summer, we saw a lot of corporations make statements, but we didn't see any changes in terms of their leadership or their hiring or anything else. So to me, Black Lives Matter is a powerful statement. And yet I personally am tired of seeing people's signs unless it means there's actually systemic change. It's my understanding that yesterday the officers in Wisconsin who shot Jacob Blake are not going to be indicted. Again, those are the systems I want to change. I want to get to a place where if a Black person is killed in this country, we don't have to march for justice. We don't have to send letters, these things should just happen. So again, I'm glad that there's awareness, but yeah, at the corporate level, they need to do some more work.
Coach Woodard says, same question to Shay. Where does the world go from here? That's what Coach Woodard is asked. Usually he prompts us to get the origin story, but we got it. So now he's on to what's next.
Well, I think that where the world's going to go, it's going to be really interesting. And when I was in the green room there, just looking at what's going on out at Georgia, I think that we can't get complacent. I think that right now, a lot of Americans, particularly white Americans, love to put the onus of the racial animus of the past several years on a specific individual. But that specific individual is a symptom of a larger problem. That person just tapped into it. Like they were able to let's like know that it was there and to push that door. I think that we moving forward, especially having our first vice president, who is a Black woman, she is an Asian woman, she is a woman. You know, it's like all of those things. I think that sometimes we are very naive in this country. We have a very childlike faith, a very childlike view of the world, which is why we struggle in the middle of this pandemic, because we don't know how to be adults. So I think it becomes easy to go, oh my God, we're making progress. And it's like, no, actually, we're not. And we didn't make any progress with the first Black president either. The real work happens in our day-to-day lives. It's to some degree what you're doing here. You know, bringing in, trying to have these uncomfortable conversations, thinking about what you can do. So that's where we go from here.
A question, one thing I've seen a bunch of different times is how the different parts of the gay movement and different parts of the civil rights movement, for lack of a more encompassing term, share from each other and borrow from each other. I wonder if it's one of those things that you think about, and I'll throw it to Julie. Do you know, when you were doing the things you were doing, did you borrow it all from anything that you saw from other movements, or was it just like you just kind of did it your way?
Oh, I mean, well, I did it my way for a long time and found that it was really lacking because coming from like a conservative evangelical viewpoint, so much of it was focused on individual hearts and minds, which is so important. And at the same time, I really lacked an understanding of just the systemic changes necessary. I didn't understand power. I didn't understand how these systems function and operate. And so for me, so much of learning about how to do this work was in learning about anti-racism and reading folks like Cornel West, who helped break down for me like, oh, hey, this is how it all works. This is how somebody so kind-hearted like my mom can end up really causing a lot of damage in my life as a vulnerable 16-year-old, because there's these people in power that are telling her and scaring her into these viewpoints. And so, big time anti-racism work and just teaching on systemic injustice period has been fundamental to my process.
It seems like there's never an end to what Shay talking about growing up. Jonathan liked that comment, by the way, Jonathan Harrison, with Shay talking about, we haven't learned to grow up. I mean, the world needs endless teachers too. My 18-year-old is both gay and trans. So I get a lot of conversations about that. I have a lot of parents kind of quietly saying, my kid's trans and I'm having trouble saying their name, the right name now and all that. What do you do with it? Like it's amazing. Or the question I was given the other day was, how do you keep it straight? And I was like, because that's who they are. Like they've identified, they said, this is what I am. You just kind of replace it. And sure, you're going to look, parents are forever going to be parents and say the wrong kid's name anyway. But now I just pick from all the other people in the household, my other son gets beat up too. Doesn't matter. I just don't use their dead name that way. So we have one last question before we get out of here, which is what goes in your backpack? Shifting times, everything's crazy. We're building on sand. Nothing's really working. Can't take everything with us, but we can add one thing, either physical or metaphorical, to the backpack. Kerry, what's a great physical thing that people have added to the backpack?
Champion beatboxer Butterscotch put a banana because I guess she's able to manipulate things in her mouth with it. So I thought that was interesting. Whiskey Nate said a book you hate, because if it's the only book you have, you'll read it and eventually learn something new from it. I thought that was interesting.
You could do metaphorical something, or rather, like you could do hope, or you could do pride in your nation, like Horacio Garcia Rojas did. He's a Mexican actor. And you could do I don't know. You always say the same.
I love Dave Landau's fear and vulnerability, but we have so Ariana, a burlesque performer, Ariel Helvetica said kindness. I think that's very important.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So we have the question to both of you. So Shay Stewart-Bouley, what would you add to the backpack?
Grace. I think that, it's important that we extend grace to ourselves and most certainly grace to our others, grace towards others, because it's something that we don't do enough of in this society.
Grace is that's a very good word. So I like that one. Okay, Julie, what do we add to the backpack?
We need an incredible community. We can't do hard things alone. And I found that my community, my people were there to like, give me a cup of water or help me edit my book. And especially really, really, truly celebrating those who are different from us. Like nobody wants to be tolerated. We want to be celebrated. And so truly celebrating queer people in our communities, Black women, immigrants, and saying like, hey, you have expanded our capacity for creativity and delight just by simply showing up as yourself.
It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. So I think it's going to be a good time for a community as well. This is big opportunity. Holding down Maine, though, the Black girl in Maine. I don't know. Chicago's still pretty. Our friend Erica Nicole Clark is from there. She's Mr. T's daughter, who's also a stand-up comic. So we got a lot of Chicagoans through, but
yeah,
not
I was just thinking
people.
when I went to catechism, I got slapped in the face for asking, how do you know there's a God? I was like, well, how do you know? And they're like, whack. I was like 7. I remember that vividly. I remember being asked to stay back and pray extra because I asked questions like, oh, I remember this. What if you do something bad and you're not sorry? What if you're just not? You want me to show up here and tell you that I am? Or
Isn't
no?
that lying? And should they be then also confessing to the lie?
They didn't appreciate that question either. So,
oh my gosh, what a precious child.
I'm a precious adult now.
That's a Texan way to say that too. You're so special. Bless
Yep.
your heart.
Yeah.
My grandmother, however, I will say, born and raised French Catholic, so she took Lent pretty seriously. So one of the things I'll tell you for sure is that when my Grammy came to Lent time, she gave up the same thing every single year, every time.